Hello, Tungsten Miner here. Today I'm going to talk about chisels and bits, which is a mod that I've recently started playing with in my new mod pack, Quiet Countryside. And you can see the Let's Play series for that on my channel. But today, let's focus on just this one mod here. So Chisels and Bits adds a whole bunch of stuff that has to do with making miniature little blocks, so 1/16th scale blocks in Minecraft. It does this by giving you the option to make a bunch of different chisels. They all have roughly the same recipe. Just take some kind of whatever material and a stick, put them side by side, and you'll get a chisel. You can do the same thing with iron, you can do the same thing with gold, and you can do the same thing with diamond. The only substantial difference between any of them being that the ones made out of better materials last longer. So I'm going to grab this diamond chisel here. And what this is going to allow me to do is you can see that little black box is where I'm going to chisel a bit off. So if I wanted to grab that corner, I left click and it knocks off the corner of that block. And as you can see, drops it in my inventory. So now I can take that block and say drop it right over there. Doink. A perfectly tiny miniature 1/16 scale little block. But to do anything like that would take literally forever. So if you hold down the Alt key or the Option key on a Macintosh, you get a bunch of other choices of how you want to carve bits off of the block. So maybe you want to grab a whole line. So here you can see the highlight covers the entire line. And here where I've taken that chunk off, it's one less. So now I've gotten the remaining 15 bits across because I'd already chopped off that corner. And maybe what I want to do is add it to this one so that I make a line going across that way. Well, when I'm placing things down, I can do the same thing, hold down the Alt or Option key, and get all the same choices for placing blocks back in the world as I did for carving them off. So if I choose line again, and I line it up to poke that guy, I can now right-click, and it's going to fill in the rest of that line. Now the line tool is going to cover the entire block. So even though I put down that bit right about there, it filled in the rest of that 1 meter cell all the way to the edges. It didn't make it 1 meter back from where I started. So you have to be a little careful about what you're doing. The next option is to take a plane. So I can, for example, carve off this whole back surface by left clicking. And now I've got a whole bunch of these things. And as you can imagine, if I were to carve up this entire block, why don't I do that? So I'm going to grab all the same material. My inventory is now filled with all these little teeny chunk pieces, and there's a whole bunch floating on the ground because it makes so many of them. So I'm going to use the plane and start putting them back again. And as I do that, it fills up frees up lots of space in my inventory until eventually I can put everything back again, except for the one slice that I took off. So in order to make it a little bit more reasonable to carry all of these things around, one of the tools you get is this Chiseled Bits bag. It works kind of like an inventory, so if I right-click, I can see the contents of it. But when I chisel blocks this way, and let's say I'm going to grab that whole block again, you notice no blocks scattered on the ground, and in my inventory, there's only one stack. But the damage applied to this Chiseled Bit bag has been negated. So it's getting a little bit fuller as you want to think about it. And here the stacks can be 4 times as big for one, and you can have a bunch more of them. So it's kind of a handy inventory for carrying around lots and lots of bits. And you can have more than one of these in your inventory. So if you find that you're doing lots of projects with bits and you've got too many to carry in one bag, you can just make yourself another one. Pretty easy recipe too. Just take one bit of any kind at all and surround it with wool of any kind at all, and that gets you your bag. You can also get rid of things, so I want to delete the bag contents. So I can click and then click again and get rid of all the stuff that I had in my inventory. And so that gets rid of all of those birch blocks that I had. So I can grab those ones, so I have a few more here, and maybe I want to get rid of those too. I can also, if I have more than one kind of bit in my bag, so let's say I grab this guy, I've got a bunch of these sprucewood ones, and I'm holding down the Shift key. And that shows you what that bit actually turns into as a full block. I've got some birchwood and I've got some sprucewood, and if I want to get rid of just the birchwood ones, let's say I grab this one bit and I click it on the trash can, click it once more to get rid of just the ones of that kind. So let's say, for example, you're working on a certain project and you're done with that project. You know that that material, you're not going to use it again. You want to just get rid of the extra bits. You can drag that one over and leave the rest of the bits behind in your inventory. Okay, so now let's keep talking about some of the ways that we can drop things down in the world here. We've talked about single bits, we've talked about lines. Planes I just did, that puts one whole layer on the ground. We can do connected plane, so this is going to be a little bit more interesting. Let's do this. Let's say I put down 1, 2, 3, 4, and I make myself a teeny tiny little circle on the ground there. And let's actually give myself some of that birchwood back again. Whoops. And we'll dump him over there, grab some of the birchwood. And now I'm going to make 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And okay, so now I've got a spruce and I've got a birch circle on the ground here. Now, if I go ahead and I say I want to make a connected plane, it's going to add another layer. Oh, yeah, you see how I've done that? What's going on there is you can see I've made this across boundaries. And the connected plane function only works within the same plane. So we'll get to see how that works too. If I right click, right click. Now I'm getting myself confused. If I right click on this, it's going to add spruce one layer up everywhere that's connected. And you can see how it's giving you the outline. So let's just do that now. So you can see there's birch underneath and now there's spruce all the way around on the top. If I wanted to have the whole layer, I have to do it over there as well because that's in a separate block, and this function only works within the bounds of a single block. But let's say that was a mistake. I didn't actually want to do that. If I hold down my Option key, my Alt key, I can undo and redo. So undo once, twice, and I've gotten back to here. Maybe I did want that, so I can redo and put it back again, or undo, go back again, or undo and go back further. No, actually I wanted that. Put that back again. So very, very handy because a lot of the operations you can do will lose a certain shape or bury a certain shape, or you'll just kind of plow through something or destroy it altogether. And you might lose a fair bit of the rather meticulous work this requires to make all these teeny tiny little things. So yeah, super, super big thanks to the ModMaker for putting that feature in there. What that does allow us to do then is we can do a slightly different thing of saying, let's do connected material. So now this is going to do basically the same thing, except you notice the black boundary only goes where there's birch. It doesn't go on the spruce. So I can now add a layer to the birch only. Let me stand far enough back to kind of see that. And it hasn't affected the spruce at all. So I'm building up just on that one material, not on both kinds of material. And so now maybe I can put on a layer of spruce and birch and spruce and birch and make a nice little Jenga tower out of that. And if I decide I don't like it, I happen to have a chisel in my inventory. And one of the nice features is I can left click with a stack of blocks and it will do the same thing as though I happen to be holding a chisel. So here I'm going to say get me all the connected plane, and I'm just going to scoop all of those off just like I was holding a chisel. What's next? Drawn region. This is kind of cool. So let me define a region. So here we can see this is a whole block there, which means that pixel there is the next block over. I'm going to change to line and put in a single line there. I'm going to go back to plane. I'm going to find the opposite corner, which is right there, and I'm going to put in a line over here. So now I've defined two bounds that are just outside of this block here. So if I change to drawn region and I point to this bottom block here and I hold down the right mouse button, you can see it's defining a region. And if I were to let go, it would make a box that's 1 bit tall and whatever size I happen to leave it there. But if I start climbing up this post, it gives a third dimension. So if I let go now, it fills in that whole area between the two. And the same thing works if I were to go from, say, way over here all the way back up to there. Except I didn't have enough material. Let me try again. I've got a little bit more spruce than I did birch. Start over there, and then all the way up to there, and now it fills in the whole thing. And you notice it's going to fill in only empty bits. It didn't replace those guys over there. It went right around them. At least I'm pretty sure it did. Let me say we're going to take these off and just double check. Yep, sure enough. See, that's still birch. So it's only going to replace the air blocks. But when you're drawing a region, you can go across block boundaries, which makes it very handy for filling in bigger areas. And you can change in the config. It's not infinite. You can't like walk 100 meters away and have it fill things in. But it is configurable how far that goes. I think it starts out somewhere around 3 or 4 meters. So that's drawn region. Same material when you're dropping blocks. Just gives you a plane, just like the other ones do. Let me scoop up all this. Whoops, undo. Can't tell you how often I use that undo feature. It's quite a lot. Just cleaning up a little bit, which is actually one of the handy ways of using these tools. Okay. Right, so that was same material. Same material is mostly handy when you want to get rid of all of a certain kind of material in a whole meter. But it's also handy where if I had, for example, a couple of birch posts in the middle here, and then I also had some spruce posts in the same meter, and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't like those spruce posts. Let me get rid of all the spruce. So even the disconnected bits of spruce got all scooped up because they're all within that same 1 meter boundary. What I can also do is say, get me all the connected material. So you see how these two are all touching each other, but they're not touching any other bits of spruce. If I say, get me connected material, it's going to grab me just the ones that are touching. Now, this works and is a little bit sensitive to the plane that you're pointing at. So if I point at the side, I'm going to get all the connected pieces that have the same side. But if I'm touching this side, I'm going to get all the ones that have the same side, which is, say, just that one top block. And you can see how the black border shows that. So if I were to put down connected material here and then maybe use the replace function, so instead of placing the block in the world, I want to replace the block. I'm now going to replace that whole plane. Maybe I don't want to replace the whole plane, I want to replace just certain blocks. I can do that. And now, if I want, I can connect some of these together and then say I want to scoop up the connected material with my chisel. And you can see it's defining a region that includes just the spruce blocks that are touching each other. And not that one, not that one, not that one, not any of the other ones that weren't actually touching the same plane. But I can get all the birch because all of the birch is connected to the same plane. And as I go deeper, you can see it's not considering those part of the plane. So now I've made myself a bunch of little spruce-topped birch stalks just by digging out the birch that was around the places where I happened to grab that. So you can get pretty subtle and sophisticated with this. The next series allows you to make various size cubes, and all of these work basically the same. So with a grid snapped cube of whatever size, you're going to place down, I'm going to go back to my place mode, you're going to place down a block that is a grid cell wide, but you'll notice it's snapping itself to the grid. So it's always going to be in one of the corners, in other words. Now, if I change around to this large cube that's not the grid snapped cube, but just large cube, it's going to go wherever I want it to go. So I can drop it there, I can drop it over here. Whichever place I drop it, though, it's going to go in that spot. And I can put it wherever I like. It doesn't get snapped automatically to the grid. So I can put down a single bit, I can put down a whole line of bits, I can put down, and this is going to snap to the edges. I can put down a plane, which will snap to the edges. I can put down a connected plane, which means anything that is on the same surface as what I'm pointing at, whether it's the same material or not. This is the connected material, so it's like connected plane, except it is sensitive to the same material. Drawn region allows me to define a 3D region by dragging my right mouse button from one point to another. The same material basically is only useful for digging things up, but it grabs all of the material of that kind within that 1 meter square, even if it's not touching. Make an 1/8 size cube that's snapped to the grid, 4/4 size, half size. Make an 1/8 size cube that's not snapped to the grid, wherever you happen to be pointing, 1/4 size, half size. So those are all of the tools that come with a chisel or with a bit. And you dig things up using your left button just like normal, and you flop things down using your right button just like normal on your mouse. You have your place and replace modes, and you have your undo and redo. That's the basic functionality here for chisels and bits. Everything else we're going to talk about builds on that. Okay, so the chisel is not the only tool that Chisels and Bits gives you. Here are a few others that are worth knowing about. So first, let's talk about this diamond bit saw. So if you've got a block that you want to reduce down to definite, well-defined slices of a block, you can drop your saw in a crafting table and then drop any kind of block in there, and it will allow you to saw it into halves, basically, either vertically or horizontally. So if I grab that, toss it in there, I can now saw that one in half. I can saw it in half the other way. I can saw this one in half that way. I can saw this one in half this way. And I can keep repeating this process however much I like in whatever kind of directions or orientations I fancy until I get down to the lowest slices. So I think, yeah, that's 1/16. That's only 1 bit tall. So that's as far down as I can get. But you can basically keep slicing and slicing and slicing, and it's a lot more convenient to make a lot of certain kinds of blocks if you know you're going to need a lot of half-size or quarter-size blocks to do it with a saw rather than doing it with a chisel out in the world. Okay, so next, let's talk about this tape measure. Tape measure works by right-clicking and dragging with your right-click button down, just like defining a region with the chisel. So if I want to measure the innermost chunk of this little block here, I hold down my right mouse button and drag along. And it's going to show me, yep, that's 1 block tall and it's 14 bits by 14 bits. If I start dragging up the side of this chest, I get a 3rd dimension. So I can see that it's 1 meter wide, because that chest actually is 1 meter into its little space there, and it knows the difference there. So now that's 1 meter tall and 14 bits by 13 bits. And as I drag around, I can get, that's now 1 meter, 14 bits on one side, 15 bits on another, 1 meter now. Anyway, so as I do this, if I let go, it's going to remember that region. And in fact, I can go off and define many other regions, whatever I like. And when I don't want them anymore, I just shift and right click, and it gets rid of the existing regions. Really, really super handy tool. You wind up doing a lot of very fine, precise measuring with this mod, and this is kind of essential to make a lot of progress in certain things. The wooden wrench allows you to rotate existing Chisels and Bits blocks in the world. So here I've got a little set of axes, obsidian, quartz, and granite. So if I click on this surface, this side, it's going to rotate around that side. Right, so it's keeping the granite facing me, but it's rotating which corner the granite is in. And if I move around to the obsidian and click on the end of the obsidian, it's going to rotate around that surface. So you notice the granite is no longer facing front all the time. It's facing down now, it's facing backwards, but the obsidian is always facing towards me. And I can do the same thing with the quartz. It's going to rotate around that axis. So sometimes you've already placed a block down and you realize that you placed it facing the wrong way and you just want to change it. So your wrench is the tool you want for moving things around once they're down on the world. So those are the 3 extra tools that you get. Okay, next up, we're going to start talking about some of the tools you have for making copies of existing blocks. And this is a very common thing, right? That you'll make some elaborate little bit of, a pattern for a wall, or part of a sculpture, or a little bit of a fancy window or something, and you want to make clones of that over and over again. The mod provides this positive chisel design to be able to do exactly that. So here I've got just a diamond chisel, which I'll need. I've got a chisel bit bag, which has the materials that this little table here is made out of, all ready to go. And I'm going to take my positive chisel design pattern and right-click this little table. And now you can see I've got kind of a ghost copy, because by default, this is in replace mode. It's going to take whatever block I'm pointing this at and just remove it from the world and replace it with a copy of whatever it is I just have a pattern for. But as you saw, there's a couple of other choices. So the simplest one to understand is just placement. It's just going to add that block to the world, just like adding any other block to the world. It could be a dirt block or a stone block. I right-click, and now there's a thing there. But in order for that to work, I needed to have the materials for that object in my chiseled bit bag. If I tried to do that without my chiseled bit bag, I click, 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 nothing happening. So if you're trying to use this thing and nothing happens when you click, chances are you're short on some or all of the materials you need. Now that I've got that back again, I can go and place another table in the world. This also has the undo and redo functions that we were talking about, so I can grab that right back again. And you can see it gave me these bits back again. So what's really going on is when you undo and redo, it's actually just pretending as though you used the chisel you have in your inventory or the blocks you have in your inventory. So if I were to say like redo, it's going to use the blocks from my chisel bag in order to do that redo, which means there's a couple of limitations to this. One, if your chisel breaks or doesn't have enough durability, you're not going to be able to undo. Two, if you have thrown away some of the bits or couldn't get them in your inventory, because say your chisel bag was full and your inventory is full, then you also won't be able to undo because you don't have enough materials to put the thing back in the world if you're trying to undo removing something. And if you're too far away, normally you can only reach so far with a Minecraft tool. If you've moved away from the thing that you're trying to undo, then you'll get a little error saying you can't do that, you're too far away. So it's really just pretending as though you're going back into the world and click, 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 clicking to redo or put the thing back to the way it was. It's not an undo in the sense that you might be used to in, say, a text editor, where it just pretends that never happened. No. It undoes by doing the opposite, and it uses up the durability of your tools, it uses up your materials in order to make that undo happen. So yeah, pay a little bit of attention to how you're doing that. So the other modes here, the next mode to talk about is additive. So additive, when I click on a block, it's going to examine that block, find out what bits are already there, and leave them alone. And look at what bits aren't placed yet, and add in whatever it is that's missing to make the shape that I've got. So when I right-click and then move away, you can see the stone is untouched, but it looked at the rest of that 1 meter block and said, oh, hey, half of the table can fit in there because it hasn't been placed yet. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to drop in the rest of that table without affecting anything that was already there. The impose function works kind of almost like that, except anywhere that you're placing the block down is going to get replaced, but everything else that's not specified in your pattern is going to be left alone. So in this case, I didn't have anything under the table. It's hollow down there. There's all air blocks, if you want to think of it that way, or air bits. So it didn't touch them because those weren't part of the pattern. But the border around the side of the table and the legs of the table, they were part of the pattern, and so it did replace them. So the placement mode only adds if there's nothing there at all. Additive adds any bits which are missing but leaves everything that's there completely alone. And impose adds bits that are specified in the pattern to match the pattern, but doesn't try to mess with anything else that happens to already be there. So when we get to replace, it's now pretty clear what's going to happen, right? It's going to annihilate anything that's there already and put down whatever it is you've got in your pattern. And it gave me those, that's what I wanted. It gives me the blocks that were there. So basically, it's going to pretend to use the chisel for me to remove all the things that were already there, and then use the materials I had in my inventory or in my chisel bag in order to make whatever the object was that I specified. So placement is going to only put something down if there's nothing there already. Add is going to only add new bits. It's not going to replace any bits that were there. Impose is going to force the block to contain the pattern, but leave anything that was there alone except for where the pattern conflicts. And replace is going to get rid of everything that's there and put in whatever you've got in your pattern. So those are your 4 modes for your chisel pattern designs. And of course, you've got undo and redo, subject to the limitations that we just talked about of normal kind of tool usage. Okay, so in addition to the positive chisel design, we have a negative chisel design. And basically what this does is you right-click the same way you would have, except whatever you pointed at, all it's going to do is carve away any material which is not part of your pattern. Looks like I don't have a chisel. And of course you need a chisel to do this, because it's not really going to just magically do this. It's going to accelerate the process of using the chisel bit by bit to do it. So now if I right-click on this thing, I'm not carrying a chisel bag either, you can see what it does is to remove all of the blocks that aren't in the pattern. But it has no idea and doesn't care what sort of thing is actually in there. Okay, so now I've got all the stones in my little chisel bag here. And if I go ahead and give myself like a chunk of sandstone, drop that down there and apply my negative pattern to it, it's just going to carve off all the sandstone that doesn't match something, anything in the pattern. It does not, however, try to match the materials. That's what the positive chisel design does. It says, I know for sure that this is a pink block, and that's a green glass block, and that's a birch plank block. And I'm going to try to make them match. That's what we did over there. With the negative chisel design, it says, hey, you know what? I'm going to remember the shape, and I'm going to take away any blocks that aren't part of that shape and leave behind whatever happened to be there before. This is really handy if you want to take some shape that you've made, like this one, and just transfer it to a different texture, different material. So now I've got a stone table and a sandstone table, when what I started off was a completely different kind of table. So that's your negative chisel design, is it just removes blocks that don't match the shape of whatever you happen to have before. Next up is the mirror chisel design. So I'm going to grab some of these tools here. I've got a chisel bit bag, which happens to have the materials used to make these things here. And I've got a mirror chisel design, and I've got a positive chisel design. So the way the mirror chisel design works is it allows you to flip the axis of any given block. So a block like the ones we've been working with so far are symmetrical on one or more axes. So you can just rotate them to get them to turn around. But this thing has like a definite left-handedness to it, right? And so if I were to just copy it ordinarily, grab that guy, it's going to place itself down. I'll use placement mode there. You're going to see it's going to make the same copy. Now, if I hold down Shift and use my mouse wheel, you can see I can rotate the thing around. But if I rotate it this way, and back up here, you can see it's not an exact mirror. The pink versus green sides don't mirror each other. They're rotated. And if I flip it around this way, so you rotate it again. So I'm using my mouse wheel and Shift to rotate the block around. The other thing is when you're holding down Shift, you can see I can place this anywhere I like. It doesn't have to be locked to a certain boundary. So, and this works whenever you're placing anything with any of the chisel design patterns. But rotating this thing isn't the same thing as mirroring this thing. So I'm going to clear this pattern by dropping it in my inventory and then pulling it out. So that works for all the different patterns. You can get it clear again. And now I'm going to mirror this thing. And let's say I want to mirror it so that the pink goes over on this opposite side over here. So I'm going to face the side where I want it to flip and right-click to get the pattern into my mirror chisel design pattern. And now I need to make a copy of this into either a positive or negative design. So I'm going to drop my positive design on there. And I can do this again. I can make another positive design, but I'm going to clear it for now. And now this positive design, if I go into placement mode, is going to give me the mirrored version. See? Not rotated, but now definitely mirrored. And if I want to mirror on a different axis, I can just clear this guy out, take this, and let's say I want to mirror on the front to back axis now. I'm going to click on that one, bring you up here, grab that, clear that. And now when I place this guy down, whoops, I think I mirrored him on a different axis than I was intending to. Yeah, obviously I clicked on the bottom of that. That's what I did wrong. It's a little tricky. You got to click exactly on what you do intend to mirror. So I intend to mirror that right there. Clear that. Drop this guy down. There we go. And I want to place him right there. So now I've got this guy, which actually is a rotation of this guy, but I mirrored him twice in order to get there. So that's how you mirror. Use your mirror chisel design to click on the side you want to mirror, and then copy that onto a positive chisel design, and then you can just place that down in the world wherever you like. So that's the mirror chisel design. Next up are these chisel fluid bit tanks. So it's actually kind of cool that you can use liquid bits just the same as you can use solid bits. So I'm going to right-click this guy to go grab some of those bits. It works a little differently than regular blocks. You right-click instead of left-click. But now I've got lava bits that I can place down in the world. So let's say I want to place a plane of lava on the bottom there. And I can go grab some more and drop them down there. And so now I'm making a little bit of lava. Now I'm in survival mode, and you can see it's not quite lava. It's not exactly what you'd expect. Yeah, it's close, but not exact. Because obviously I did not burn up when I jumped in there. But it does behave like a liquid, so it's kind of close. So yeah, don't expect all of the properties to get copied over. I can do the same thing here, grab some water, and maybe I want to place this down as a solid cube, so it doesn't have to be a plane. You can do highly improbable things, even, excuse me, things that are just floating in air. So it's kind of halfway between water and halfway between bits, and yeah, the rules are a little different. You have to experiment with it a little bit to make it work. One of the things that I've tried to do, for example, is to have a regular water block, say right here, and then bits all the way around in like a little fountain. And the regular water block doesn't line up. It doesn't interact with the bit blocks correctly. So yeah, you'll have to play with it a bit to get everything to line up as you might expect it to. But it is pretty cool that you can at least get the liquid textures in there and make fountains and things too. Okay, one last thing to talk about is how does Chisels and Bits deal with blocks that are themselves light sources? So if I were, for example, to grab this glowstone block, obviously it's nighttime and there's no other light sources anywhere around, the light goes out. And then as I place these blocks back down again, I get my light source back again. Now, it's a little bit buggy, because if I just do this from scratch, you noticed it flickered on, then went off, but if I do this again from the side, it comes back on. So things are a little sketchy at this moment with this version, but basically you can eventually get what you want, where I've got this thing here, it's casting a lot of light. The default settings for the mod make the light that you get out of it proportional to the number of bits that you have in the block. So if you have 100% of the block filled up with glowstone bits, then you'll get 100% the light level that you would expect to get. But you can actually configure what percent you need before things get to 100% illumination. And I've turned mine all the way down. So as soon as I've got even 1 bit, I should get 100% illumination back again. Because, yeah, I think that's just a little bit more fun. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I want to get rid of that guy. Right, so now I've got 1 bit, and it's giving me the same illumination as an entire glowstone block. Maybe that's a bit cheating, but, well, we'll see how that goes. That's the way my mod pack is set up for right now. So fortunately, that is one of the options you have. You can play around with that. So that's Chisels and Bits. Awesome mod. If you want to see some of the things you can do with it, I highly recommend you go check out both the website for Chisels and Bits. They've got some really fascinating examples of what you can do. And 2, I recommend my own Let's Play series, number 2, where I build a 64-meter diameter circular house using these little teeny tiny bits to make it quite as circular as possible. But I also go into a lot of detail about making elaborate doorways and windows and lanterns and all sorts of great things out of chisels and bits. So highly recommended that you give this mod a try. It's really, really fantastic, and I am loving it. Anyway, if you liked this video, go ahead and hit like. If you want to know when my next video will come out, hit subscribe, and I will talk to you later.